Hi, this is Pam McDonald, your host for Banter and Beans. It's a new show that Ben Kinsley and I are putting together for the summer. It's to try to let you know what's brewing in Vermont. Get it? And we thought that what we would do, there were about 100 bills passed this session. And we thought for each show we would pick a bill and talk about it with you so you know what was happening while you were having breakfast and coffee. They were passing bills on you. I'm going to do H421 today. It's Act 38, and it's about animal cruelty. And then what did you select to do for today?
Yeah, so I've got H106, which is the Community Schools Act, and we can talk about a little bit what a community school is. So,
Yeah, we were talking about that during the session. I remember I kind of tried to look up the definition because I didn't know what a community school was. So do you mind if I jump in first?
sure, go for it.
Okay. So this is H421. And what it does, very simply, is it allows for many more animal investigators when there's a claim. The definition, of course, of animal cruelty is depriving an animal of food, water, shelter, socialization, being alone by him or herself, and vet care. Then, of course, they go into such words as malicious torturing, maiming, mutilating, and killing, which in itself is pretty disturbing. I did some investigating before I get into this bill. I'll take 2 minutes. I was active in prevent child abuse for a lot of years, and I learned that there's a correlation between people who abuse children and people who abuse animals because they are focused on abusing people or things that can't fight back. And
Yeah,
so it's
well,
a very
this can be a leading indicator, actually. Like if a child, for example, is found to be torturing animals or doing things to animals, that's often a leading indicator that they're going to move up to humans next.
Yep,
So
and
that's kind of a warning flag.
yes, exactly. One of the statistics which I found exactly like that, they said children who are sexually abused are 5 times more likely to abuse animals. And that's the way, as you were explaining, that's the way that they call out for help, or that's their way of saying, in some cases, help me because something bad's happening. So the statistics I found that every 60 seconds, one animal suffers abuse. That approximately 71% of people who are reported for domestic violence also abuse their pets, and 88% of families under investigation for child abuse are also reported for animal cruelty. And if our folks had time, the animal cruelty people and the prevent child abuse people that are going into houses to look at this, if they had the time and would think about it, that if they're going there for an animal, they should also kind of take a look at the children. In reverse, there's an issue with the children, and if they've got pets, Cesar, they're okay. So one other statistic that I found, which I thought was staggering, is that there are 10 million, with an M, million animals that die from abuse in the United States every year. I caught a glimpse of a headline that said, "We are one of the worst nations for this." Can you imagine?
Yeah.
A nation that has everything, beat up on those who can't fight back. It's really, and so H421, what it primarily does is allow for more investigators, which I think is a good thing. They would be employed by the Office of the Attorney General or the state's attorney. And individuals are people who have received training according to this bill, Section 356 of this bill, whether they've worked in been trained there, and whether they are an animal control officer authorized by the legislature. They have the ability to perform duties. So I'm going to talk about H421, as I said before. What it really does is allow for more investigators to take a look at these animal cruelty that they're getting. The investigators would work for the Attorney General or State's Attorney. They have received a lot of training. Under Section 356 of this bill, there's a great deal of information on training. They work for the Humane Society and receive training, they are an animal control officer authorized by the legislature. I also found on the website this animal cruelty investigation manual. If you want to really understand the severity of this issue, thumb through those pages. They have explanations of what some of these investigators are faced with on a regular basis. They are given the authority to perform their duties after training by the legislature, by statute, to serve in the capacity of a humane officer. There's an advisory board that keeps a list of everybody who has completed, to put together a refresher course that's put together, authorized by, approved by the legislature. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not it's the Criminal Justice Board approves the training that they develop. Itself, this does not include, and we know in Vermont we have some issues with horses, and there is a whole section there about how to shelter livestock and how to maintain livestock in a safe and healthy environment for them, but they are not included in this animal cruelty bill. It obviously is and sadly we need more investigators because the statistics, I couldn't find it on, but I know they're a good bill, and so there you go.
So it's something like 10 million, right? Yeah. Instances of animal cruelty in the US every year.
That die, that's not just the ones who live through it. Those are the ones who die.
Well, that's pretty staggering.
Yeah, no, it is. It's incredible. You know, there was a show on TV that in one of the big cities, they have the animal control officers, and the photographers went out with them on their calls. Oh my, I mean, I just can't imagine what kind of person would do that to animals there, and just maintain get them back in a safe place, and they just come alive and they're loving. And after being abused like that for so long, it's heartbreaking. It's just terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a dog lover. I've always had dogs, and and I always try to do almost all of them. I think all of them actually have been rescues, because
me too.
You know, I just have a soft spot for animals and dogs in particular, and you know, it just breaks my heart when you see like the ASPCA commercials with like dogs in cages that haven't been fed.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, it's heartbreaking. You have to turn the TV off. I can't watch that.
Oh, I know. The look on their face is like, you know, please help me. I have always had rescue animals. I don't understand. I'm not in the dog show and where you have to have papers and everything. You go to the Humane Society, these animals know within a half hour of coming home to your house that they're safe and that they're loved, and you will have a friend for the rest of your life. I mean, they just know, and they're very grateful. It's a transition watching them from being abused and bringing home to put in a safe environment.
Yeah,
I don't understand. It doesn't cost them that much to rescue them.
No, they know almost immediately. It's really, you're right. It's a magical moment when you bring an animal into your house and they realize that they're in a safe space. And it does not take them long usually.
No, they figure it out quick. So why don't you go ahead and tell us the bill you picked and talk about it a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So I picked H 106, which is which turned into Act 67. Um, it's called a act relating to equitable access to high quality education through community schools. If you've followed anything in education the last couple of years, equity is kind of a buzzword. And that's actually not really just the last couple of years. It goes all the way back to the Brigham decision. Vermont has a clause in our Constitution that requires equity for students. So this is kind of in line with that. What is a community school, you might ask? I could argue that every school in Vermont is a community school at a certain
Yes,
level.
well, we certainly try to make them that way, for sure.
For sure, yeah. But basically, the way this bill looks at the definitions that are laid out from the Learning Policy Institute. This is kind of a national movement, and Vermont, in some ways, is already there. So this may not be a huge shift from what some schools are doing in Vermont. But basically, this a community school under the Learning Policy Institute is defined as a school that serves as a resource hub to provide a broad range of easily accessed, well-coordinated supports and services to help students and families with increasingly complex needs. At their core, they're about investing in children through quality teaching, challenging, engaging, and culturally responsive curriculum, and wrapping around these supports in terms of things like mental health, physical health services, family counseling, anything that sets the school and the students up to succeed. So it's more about than what just happens in the classroom. It's also the things that happen outside the classroom, making sure that that the school itself, the school building, and the people that make up the school are really a part of the community, and that the community is supporting each other.
So is this something the Department of Ed grants a school that you are officially designated as community school? And what would be an example, Ben, of one of those schools?
Sure. Yeah, so this is a program that schools can apply for. It is a pilot program currently. There's a fixed number of slots, and so there's only, I believe it's 10, but it's a limited number in any regard. The limited number of schools that can apply for this designation. You do get some funding associated with it. The funding primarily goes to the ability to hire a school community organizer. This was one of the key findings that the National Policy Institutes had identified as the key to success for any community school. I think a lot of Vermont schools have these sort of intentions as it is. Like I said at the beginning, we could argue that every school in Vermont is a community school in the sense that they are deeply intertwined with their communities. They serve as the community hub in a number of different capacities. But what really seems to be, at least the research indicates, what really seems to tie all of this together is you need one person that kind of coordinates all of these things, making sure we've got the after school programs, we've got the sporting events on the weekends, we've got the farmers market that brings families back on Sundays. Whatever the situation is, it really kind of takes one person to coordinate all those moving pieces to make sure that all those things are happening. And so that is the kind of the key piece that the funding provides for. And then basically the rest of it is that the schools then have to agree when they apply for it. These are the things that we're going to have this new position, this school community school organizer focus on.
That's really exciting, actually. And I mean, we focus on local control, although I don't know how much is left actually. But this might beef up the local control focus of a community because it brings attention to the school as a hub. I know I feel my daughter's all grown up, and um, and unless you have children in the school, you don't participate as much. And maybe this person or this effort will bring everybody together, whether you have a child in that school or not, which I would welcome.
Yeah, so this is one of those important things that that is not specifically identified in this bill, but has been talked about in the context of community schools. And you see this more with technical education centers, where which usually are regional, and they're often attached to a high school.
Right.
But having adult learning classes, right? So things that give adults a tie to the school.
Yes, right.
Could be anything from taking an accounting class or a business class, say business owners who are trying to figure out how to do accounting for their business or do taxes for their business. These are the types of things that that oftentimes technical education centers provide. They have the staff and resources to do it, but it doesn't even have to be something that complicated. It could be a pottery class that just a member of the community hosts that is
my
open.
favorite thing. They could do cooking.
Could be cooking. Yeah, absolutely.
Cooking.
You'd be surprised how much of a skill that is that people are lacking, right? Cooking class. It could be it could be something like an art class, like a paint and sip, for example. It could be anything like sewing or needlework or anything that's a skill that's transferable. It could be hobby. It doesn't need to be, you know, it doesn't need to be overly complicated, but what it does is it could be a dancing class, you know?
Yeah.
It could be a dancing club.
Well,
but those things tie people to their school.
Yeah, I was thinking that if the older people who have been planting vegetables their whole life would work with the kids to pass on their planting skills and the tending to the crop skills, wouldn't that be cool? Where the kids would get a chance to work with older people as well, and have a focus on the whole community, no matter what your age. That'd be cool.
You know, it's funny. One example of this, it was kind of exactly that. It was a multi-generation thing that they were able to bring people who were, in retirement age, bring them in, and they were teaching middle schoolers like how to cook, how to how to sew, how to do some of those life skills. And then in turn, they flipped the tables and had the middle schoolers teaching the retired people how to do Facebook and Instagram, and those types of things, so that those people could then use those platforms to communicate with their grandchildren and keep up with them and things like that. So it's kind of that symbiotic thing.
It's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Years ago, down in the vet's home in Bennington or Brattleboro, where is the vet's home? Bennington.
Bennington.
But anyway, they had care in the facility. Yeah, Bennington. They had a daycare facility, and so a lot of times I would come over and join the kids. And I don't think it's there anymore, but I was down there a couple of times when I was commissioner of personnel, and I loved it, and everybody loved it. The older vets loved it. The kids loved it. They had their favorite old guy, and it was a marvelous interaction. I don't, for some reason, it didn't. It's not there anymore, I don't think. The older folks feel a little younger for a few minutes, playing with.
Exactly.
So. I like this bill. It's awarded the term community school because I think it's got to open up avenues for money too. As you mentioned, I'm sure there's a lot more coming if you're a community.
Yeah, some of the research on this, which is interesting. Again, this is from the Learning Policy Institute. That was kind of the basis for this bill. Was their research. So the research, I'll just read this verbatim. The research shows that community school interventions can result in improvements in a variety of student and family outcomes, including attendance, academic achievement, reducing systemic racial and economic injustices and inequities, and high school graduation rates, and can meet Every Student Succeeds Act standards, that's the ESSA Act standards, evidence-based approaches to school supports identified for comprehensive blah, 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 blah. I'll skip the wordy language there. But the interesting part, so according to impact studies, each dollar invested in a community coordinator position, so these are those coordinator positions we were talking about that
Right.
the bill provides funding for in the pilot project format. Every dollar spent on a community coordinator position returns approximately $7 in net benefits to the school.
Wow, that's great.
And that's based on a case study.
That's a great return on investment.
Which is excellent. Yeah, it's an excellent return on investment.
1 to 7. Who the hell makes that kind of return? That's great. So, and it should take a pretty special person to be creative and think of ideas and be personable and love kids and love grown-ups and old people. Love their community. And do you know there was a report, I don't know whether the governor mentioned it the other day, but the pandemic has increased concern for community, people's level of contribution to the nonprofits and helping out restaurant. It's just increased because it's a shared experience, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned over this last year. And so people have just realized the importance of community and the importance of being financially generous, I guess is a good word, when you can. I think that what's happened is there's a lot of pluses that came out of this disaster.
Yeah, I mean, aside from, it was certainly a medical crisis. There's no doubt that. But every time that we go through a national crisis, and in this case it was an international crisis,
right.
There's a certain level of camaraderie that happens. There's a shared experience, right? Shared experiences are incredibly powerful. We can all talk about being isolated indoors for months and understand what we're talking about to each other, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And some of us felt that more strongly than others, to be fair, but it's a shared enough experience that we can all talk about it and we all know what we're saying.
Yeah,
we can all relate to it because we all lived it together. So so those are really powerful moments, and there are good things that come out of that despite all of the bad.
Yeah. That's good. I wonder, they must have used other states as a model, or their educational systems in other states to use this as a model. It's probably not in the bill, but it would have been interesting to find out who's done this and where is it successful.
Yeah. There's a couple different school districts across the country that have done this. Again, it's still in a pilot project form for the current version of the bill, but I mean, if this is successful, we could see this type of thing roll out to most, if not all, school districts, especially if the ROI is there. I mean, that's always a challenge.
1 to 7, that's amazing. And the school is the hub right now if you have kids. If you don't have kids, it's up. And in our town in Berlin, we don't even have a center of town. You just live in Berlin and not really can point to downtown.
Yeah.
This there you go. I love doing this, Ben. I learned a lot while we were busy covering pensions and broadband and some of the other stuff we were covering. All these bills were zipping along.
Yeah, well, there's a lot that the legislature does, and a lot of it goes under the radar, which is why we're doing this show.
Yes, right, exactly. And drinking our coffee while we're doing it.
I know. I'm ashamed to say I don't have anything too fun.
It's a little cold at the moment.
Yeah.
Mm.
So we'll have to fix that for the next week.
Yep. Cool. So you want to?
Yeah, we are at time for today, but thank you everyone for joining us. And until next week, keep an eye on what's brewing in Vermont.